A pleasure to meet y'all at last. And for today's piece regarding films I should have talked about years ago, we're going to go on ahead and get involved with more illumination related stuff. Now, I'm not just talking about the Secret Life of Pets duology that I had recently covered, but I intend to do a few more picks here and there because next time I do films I'm willing to talk about again, I'll probably have all 4 of the Despicable Me films covered, knowing that I had gone through the Minions films by this point, so I'll probably do a full marathon of that sort of stuff in the future. For now though, let's go on with the Lorax. Yeah, so for 2012, you can expect a good number of different films that would come around just that same time. 2012 also had other unique films like The Amazing Spider-Man starring Andrew Garfield, and of course Disney's Wreck-It Ralph. But apart from that, the Lorax was something pretty special to most of us. It's a bit of a take on the Dr. Seuss sort of stuff that would come around every now and then, and while there had already been some handling by Disney and Universal and a number of other different companies, various Dr. Seuss adaptations have been made over the years. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Cat in the Hat, and some animated pics based off of Dr. Seuss's other famous pieces. Even the Sneetches had their own sort of animated segment at some point. Well, in any case though, in the year 2012, with such brilliant CG craftsmanship, the Lorax actually brought along a pretty unique story in the form of the musical, with some drama, some comedy, and of course a sleazy corporate owner whom is bent on basically making the city pay for a ton of fresh air. Yeah, no joke. The city is pretty much devoid of any plants and other such natural oxygen makers, so the only course of action, of course, is to get some bottled air that can be used to either cool themselves down on a hot day, or of course, just to have something to stay alive. The fact is, it's one of those sort of corporatization and exploitation type of films, in which that, in this particular case, a guy named O'Hare basically rules over the town, that of which a 12-year-old boy named Ted, played by Zac Efron, happens to live in. He also has his girlfriend, Audrey, played by Taylor Smith, and of course you have Rob Riggle as O'Hare himself. However, one day it eventually comes around in which that Ted receives some sort of notion about what the place used to be like prior to it having to sell out to the O'Hare company entirely, and so he goes on a bit of a mission, escaping from the walls of the town and going on over to some mysterious place. Basically, it's a high-rise house of some sorts that's in the middle of nowhere and in a bit of a dark and dreary place out there in what's pretty much like the wasteland. Apparently there's this person inside whom Ted gets to know by the name of Onceler. Yeah, that's apparently the name that they gave him. The character, played by Ed Helms, is known as Onceler. He actually goes into talk about Ted over the course of a certain amount of time. It could be a week or two, because every day Ted would pay a visit to the Onceler, and he would tell him some stories about what the past was like. More importantly, what he apparently did to make the town into what it is today. Apparently there's a little gadget out there known as the Thneed. And what exactly is the Thneed? Well, apparently it's a multi-purpose tool that can be used for a variety of different usages. A bath towel, a hat, and a variety of other things can be seen. There's a lot of functionality to this sort of piece. I guess it's sort of like the real-life equivalent to what one might expect from a multi-tool. Anyways, these needs actually become so popular over time that this Onceler guy, when he was younger and able to sport some pretty snazzy outfits, he of course takes down a few trees. Trees that used to form a very large forest. The forests of which were kept by an orange mustachioed guy known as the Lorax, played by Danny DeVito. And I will say, the way that they put him together here, and the way they have Danny DeVito voice him, it's all pretty well done and all that good stuff. But But in all honesty, it's probably not the best way they could have done so. I mean, it's one thing where the Lorax might tolerate a couple of trees going down, but when he starts to see that Onceler is actually really bringing in the tools and equipment to tear down as many trees as possible to make more needs for the growing public, the thing is, it all comes down into a unique montage in which that simple old question, how bad can I be, basically means that over time, all the trees end up getting cut down. The Lorax makes one final wording to him that the last tree, now that it's down, all the creatures that dwell within this once great forest are now set to retreat. Onceler essentially ripped apart an entire home, a habitat if you will, for all these creatures that were living inside. Even the Lorax himself, hilariously, as I recall, it's an image that's been imprinted in my mind pretty much forever, where he basically lifts up his butt and then ascends to the sky like an angel. The Onceler seems to understand about the consequences of what he's done here, because the Lorax and all the creatures from within this forest are now gone, much like all the trees themselves. All because he was really willing to grow his business of needs for the ever-growing population of his own public. So, the thing is that the town, even though it managed to live without all these trees around to give it some fresh air, even Ted came to the realization that he knows what he's got to do. He's essentially got to prove to the world that trees mean everything, rather than just some corporate sleaze bag whom apparently is taking every penny out of everyone's pocket just to give them fresh air that they could literally get from planting trees. So, knowing that I live in an area with a lot of trees in it, we can get all the fresh oxygen we'd ever desire. Even in winter, I'm sure we're still going to be getting a ton of it. So at the end of the day, with another song, apart from the several that we already got, including a montage of needs, a montage of how bad can Onceler be, and of course, a song about letting it grow. The whole town seems to rejoice in the idea of letting nature re-enter their lives, rather than have Mr. O'Hare himself continue on this needless strive for corporatization, and more importantly, putting many more dollars into his pocket, or whatever currency those guys use. So after all is said and done here, Onceler decides to make his way out of his house, and of course, plant a tree for the first time. Once he does so, the Lorax surprisingly comes back, and all is well. It's essentially a unique story that I'm more than glad came to the realization in which that allowed for O'Hare to pretty much get kicked in the crotch by the public. Because the endless need for money basically allows for a natural consequence of certain things. Because when there's such a thing as industrialization and corporatization, you know there's going to be something going wrong outside of the building, or outside of the town even. And knowing that Ted and Audrey had to go through a lot of trouble just to get evidence of what once existed outside the walls to the public's eye, so that way they could finally get what they're looking for. Some nature, and more importantly, the decline for O'Hare Industries. So, I'd say this was well made for what it was, but I honestly feel like that a few holes, or voids if you will, still have yet to be truly filled for it to be considered a great film by all means. Nonetheless, I still enjoyed it for what it was, and it was a great thing for me to watch during 7th grade. Yeah, I bet you didn't know by now that 2012 was when I had gone through 7th grade. And so, with all that in mind, I'll just go on ahead and leave it at a 7.7 out of 10.1. My overall scoring for this one, and let's be real, I got at least one more entry for Illumination that's a lot more recent than most of the others I've done so far. But if you want to see that, stick around for tomorrow. And make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.